Good evening and welcome back. So this video will be dealing with the life of Pi. I had an issue with the previous one. Like I made this whole PowerPoint and then I saved it somewhere and then I lost it. So I have no idea where I saved it. It just went missing. So I just had to redo this whole thing. And I thought, okay, since you guys are writing English like next week, I thought, why not? Let me finish doing this. So let's just jump into it. Cool. So this part two isn't part two of the novel, it's part two of the series of videos I'm doing. I'm not sure how many parts it will have. Haven't thought that far yet. I think in the previous PowerPoint, I said I'll do chapter 16 to chapter 32, but then I changed my mind and I decided to do chapter 16 to chapter 36 because then it ties up part one of the novel quite nicely, right? So let's start with this. We are all born like Catholics, aren't we? In limbo, without religion, until some figure introduces us to God. After that meeting, the matter ends for most of us. If there is a change, it is usually for the lesser rather than the greater. Many people seem to lose God along life's way. That was not my case. And this is what Pi says at the beginning of chapter 16. So we can already see something about Pi's character just from these few sentences. We can see that his faith and his spirituality is very important to him. He makes reference to the Christian religion, but then he very quickly swerves to God, right? And the way that he speaks about God, it doesn't seem to be specifically tied to the Christian religion God. It's God as an entity, God as an idea. Some figure is going to introduce you to this ultimate being, and along life's way, some people will decide, oh, this is nonsense, this isn't true. And other people will just use that to base their whole lives on this idea of God. And Pi was the latter. So this PowerPoint slide, I tried to tie everything to the idea of religion and faith. And you'll see that a lot of the things that we speak about in these chapters, basically from chapter 16 to chapter 36, centers around Pi's religion. It centers around Pi's faith. And it asks the question, is it possible to have more than one religion? Because it comes back to that idea of truth that we discussed in part one. Like, what is the truth? Can there be multiple forms of the truth? And if you believe that your religion is the truth, then how can you follow a different religion? Isn't that in contradiction? So let's have a look. So we'll start with chapter 16, where Pi explains that he was taken to the temple, a Hindu temple, as an infant, so as a baby, and it inspired his love for all religions. His aunt refers to it as samskara, an important moment in his life. And it actually really was, because from that first time of entering the temple as a baby, getting exposed to the scents and the sights and the things like that, Pi immediately fell in love with religion. And he believes in Brahman, Sanguna, and Atman. So apologies if I said those things wrong. So Brahman Sangura is basically just this idea of an unchanging spirit or consciousness that underlies all things. You can sort of think of it like an ocean, like an infinite ocean. It's just this thing covers everything. And then you also have Atman, which is the essence of an individual. You can think of it like a soul. So you can think of it like a drop of water. So in Hinduism, they kind of have this idea that your soul kind of has to go through many cycles before it can join in with this big ocean that is Brahman. And he becomes very passionate about gods in Hinduism. because they symbolize strength, passion, and love. And many gods in the Hindu religion do not show weakness. They are portrayed as these amazing beings that can do amazing things, and they basically make a big change in the world. And that is what Hinduism means for Pi, right? So Pi is basically just a Hindu until he's about 14 years old, where his family goes on holiday. And then while on holiday, he kind of stumbles into this Catholic church and he meets a guy called Father Martin. And this tends to happen a lot with religion, especially when someone gets exposed to a new religion. They start asking questions like, why do you believe this? Can you explain that? And all of those things. So for Pi, that grew up in the Hindu religion, gods to him, well, firstly, there was multiple. There's multiple gods in Hindu religion. And now Father Martin is saying there's only one God, but he's got the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and all of that is very confusing to Pi. And they also have this thing in the Hindu religion, gods are sort of infallible, you can't hurt them. But then in the Christian religion, we've got Jesus that is God, but he's weak like a human. He curses at a fig tree and the fig tree dies. It's very childish. And Pi thinks, like, how can you have a God that is so weak and so human-like? It's so different to what we've had before. And then there was another issue where God sort of sacrifices himself. And Pi asks, how can a God die? How can a God give up his life? Why? Why? And Father Martin responds to all of Pi's questions with love. So to Father Martin, Christianity is all about love. So when Pi kind of gets all of those going, like his brain is a little working, and he's like, oh, well, that makes sense. I love. I think I want to be a Christian now. So as a result, Pi becomes a Christian. However, he still keeps his Hinduism and his Hindu beliefs close to his heart, and he remains Hindu. So he's Hindu and he's Christian. And then at 15 years old, Pi discovers Islam. So he enters a shop and he's offered bread, and it's like this unleavened bread. So it's like a flat bread, like a naan, I guess. And the baker shows Pi how to make this bread. But in the process of showing Pi how to make the bread, there's a call to prayer. And in front of Pi, the baker starts doing his salah. So he starts doing his prayers. And this really inspires Pi. Pi likes that idea of touching his head to the ground and feeling that feeling, getting your whole body involved with your religion, not just sitting there in silence like with Christianity. He likes the idea of actually bowing down and getting your whole body involved in prayer. And so he joins the baker in the mosque, and then he follows the baker's example with doing the prayer and the salah. And to him, Islam is a religion of brotherhood and devotion. Now, the baker, as you guys will know from the previous video, his name is Satish Kumar, and he is the one that inspires Pi to study theology or religion. Then in between all of that, you've got a little interlude where the author kind of peeks in. And the author interrupts Pi's story, and this first idea of the better story comes to light. So remember, the whole idea of Life of Pi was that he was trying to make you believe in God. So at the end, you're going to believe in God. And up till this point, you've been made to believe that everything that happens is a true story. And now you see that Pi is sort of experimenting or trying on all these different religions. And he's thinking about them in terms of their stories. Like, this is the story of Hinduism. This is the story of Christianity. This is the story of Islam. And this is referenced again where in one of the later chapters where they discuss the death of the atheist and the agnostic. So the death of the atheist, seeing that white light and saying, oh God, oh love, oh whatever. And then the agnostic, well, oh, this must be my brain dying. So that's this idea, like, what would you rather want to see at the end of your life? Like, you've got that, is it just an off switch? Is there something more? And then you get this idea of what would you choose to believe? Would you choose to believe the better story? Would you choose to believe the other story? Then you also get the argument between the three wise men. So basically, three men basically witness Pi. He's either praying or he's going to the temple or he's going to the church, and each one have seen Pi separately in these places, and therefore they all just assume that Pi has chosen that religion. And then one day all three of them get together and they start talking, and Pi's mom and dad are there, and they're like, oh, that Pi, he's such a good Christian. What are you talking about? He's not Christian, he's Muslim. What? I saw him in the temple the other day. He's obviously Hindu. And these three men are arguing with poor Pi in the middle. And what is interesting about their argument is that at different stages of the argument, two sides will usually agree with each other. So you'd have the Hindu and the Muslim agreeing with each other about the Christian. You'd have the Christian and the Muslim agreeing with each other about the Hindu person. And you'd have the Christian and the Hindu agreeing about the Muslim person. So I think that was a literary device to show that even though these ideas are supposedly at odds with each other, there are points where they intersect and there are points where it comes to agreement. And one major point is that all of the men, or all three of them, agree that Pi is pious. So pious might be a new word for you. It just basically means he's very religious. So even if you can't pinpoint what religion he's actually following, if he's following the Muslim religion, the Hindu religion, the Christian religion, whichever religion he's following it properly. Like, he's going to church, he's going to the temple, he's going to mosque, he's doing his fasts, he's doing his prayers. He's a very pious person, or he's a very religious person. And all of them agree with that, no matter what religion he actually belongs to. And this argument carries on and carries on and carries on, and Pi actually stops the argument with one sentence. And it's basically, all religions are true. I just want to love God. So at the end of the day, he boils religion down to one essential being, that idea of Brahman, this eternal being, this infinity, this idea of infinity. And he believes that at the end of the day, all religion is just about loving God. Whether you are Muslim, whether you are Hindu, whether you are Christian, it all boils down to just loving God. And it raises a question within the reader, is it possible to follow multiple religions at once? Is it fine to say that all religions all just boil down to loving God, and therefore you can follow multiple religions at once? Or are there different forms of things? And it's just something to think about. Hindus, in their capacity for love, were indeed hairless Christians. So this is a quote from chapter 16. Just as Muslims, in the way they see God in everything, are bearded Hindus, and Christians, in their devotion to God, are hat-wearing Muslims. And that is a quote by Pi Patel. You can see that he has merged all three of those religions into one. He believes that Hindus, Christians, and Muslims, you are all essentially the same thing. Why? Because Christianity can be boiled down to love, and Hindus can love. Muslims see God in everything, and so do Hindus. Brahman, that idea of Brahman again. And then Christians, in their devotion to God, are hat-wearing Muslims. So this is actually a thing I heard from a colleague of mine, that the actual meaning of the word Muslim is believer. So do you believe in God? And if you believe in God, then you are a Muslim. So Christians, in that sense, I think, can also be considered Muslims because they are devoted to God. Just an interesting tidbit there. So in chapter 31, we meet the zebra, and I have spoken about the zebra in part 1, but the zebra represents God, basically, because you've got the two Kumars, the atheist Kumar and the religious Kumar, that meet, and they can both appreciate the zebra. They both give the zebra, take from the zebra whatever is relevant to their religion, or their beliefs, and they both share that carrot with the zebra. So that carrot is split in half, and the one Kumar feeds the zebra, and then the other Kumar feeds the zebra. And at the end of the day, both of them feel enriched by the experience, despite their different ideas. Right. So why do you think these chapters 16 to 36, or I think at this point it's up to about 32, why do you think these chapters focus so much on Pi's spirituality and religion? These chapters were all about helping you understand Pi as a character, which is going to basically feed into part 2 of the story. Firstly, it shows us that his religion keeps him going. It shows us how his devotion shaped his life and his experiences. It shows how ritual and prayer comfort him. So one of the things that draws him to the Muslim religion, for example, is that whole exercise of prayer, getting your whole body involved in prayer. He likes the rituals of the Hindu religion, where you follow these steps, and that helps center him and bring him back to reality. And then with these other religions, it gives him strength, and that strength was actually vital for him to endure the suffering that he goes through in part 2. So chapter 35 and 36 is a turning point, chapter 35 particularly, because this is where Pi and his family board the Tsum Tsum, and Pi's life changes forever. So even the word Tsum Tsum has some significance there. It is a Hebrew word, and it comes from this idea of, I actually thought this was so interesting when I was doing the research, that it's a Jewish idea of basically God. Let me pause that. Pause. Are you guys quiet? Okay, okay. I just need to sort my doggies out. I think I can say. There you go. And the doggy threw a tantrum, and I must resume my slideshow. Where's the button? Okay. Is this thing still recording? I hope it's still recording. I must remember to cut that out if I can. All right. So, yeah, when I was doing my research for this, the idea of tzimtzum is coming from the Jewish, it's like a, what do you call it, school of thought called Kabbalah. And what I thought was interesting about this is that in this tzimtzum idea, it's the idea that in order to create the universe, God basically had to separate the heavens from the normal, like, place. I don't know how to say it. So in order to do that, God had to withdraw or contract, because obviously if you're going to make a place that is not holy, you can't have holiness there. So God withdraws the holiness, and he creates the sort of empty space, this absence of the kingdom of God, so to say. And in that kingdom, that is where he builds, or she builds, and you know, God is a woman. That God is a they, them. Anyway, so in this absence of God, this is where the earthly realm basically exists. By calling this ship that Pi and his family bought the Tzimtzum, you're showing that there's going to be an absence of God here. and what is going to be the result of that. So in the next chapter, chapter 36, we come back to reality, so to speak, with the author, where the author shows us that Pi has a son and a daughter, and he reminds us that Pi's story has a happy ending. And by saying that, it already implies that something terrible is going to happen. Because why would you specifically mention that there's a happy ending unless that means that something sad is going to happen? So that sort of prepares us for the bumpy ride ahead. And what's the bumpy ride? Yeah, you guessed it, the ship sinks. So how to analyze an extract? The first thing you need to do when you walk into that exam venue is you are going to be given like 10 minutes to read through the script. And when you read through it, I want you to take note of key concepts, key ideas, characters that pop up. I want you to identify symbols, imagery, very creative language that the writer is using. Take note of the thoughts and the feelings and the moods of the characters. And as you are reading it, always try to keep it in context. So this is a word that the learners that I teach often struggle with, and I see it in the history as well, where they say, put this in context or place this extract in context. They don't know what the word context is. So short, easy way is that context is simply background. So this this extract doesn't just occur in a vacuum. You need to know all the events that lead up to this point and all the events that's going to happen afterwards. So in this case, we know that there are political issues in India. And so Pi's father decides he's going to sell the zoo. He starts selling the animals, but he's obviously not able to sell all of them. And then the remainder, they kind of load them up on the Tsum Tsum to take them to Canada. And then we get to this point, which is after a year of preparation. Now the family is getting ready to move. And the mother is sort of feeling regretful. Like she doesn't even smoke, but she wants to buy cigarettes because the cigarettes remind her of home. So let's go have a look and see how this question will be asked, or just an example of a question on an extract like this. So it says, refer to lines 16 and 17. The sun was shining. I was terribly excited. In light of later events, discuss how these lines are ironic. So what do we need to do here? Firstly, this in light of later events refers to things that are happening later. So this sentence here is what we call foreshadowing. It's echoes of something that's going to happen later in the plot. And we know what happens later in the plot. The ship sinks. So he's excited, but then we know as readers that the ship is going to sink. So he sinks. So he shouldn't be excited. The next thing is the word discuss, which means you need to consider all information and reach a conclusion. The next word is ironic. Now, ironic might be a new word for you, and it basically means that something is the opposite of what you expect. And that song by Alanis Morissette is wrong. A lot of the stuff she mentions is just coincidence. It's not ironic at all. So, for example, if you were put in detention and you say, oh, lovely, I love detention, then that is ironic because everyone knows you don't actually love detention. And that's irony for you. So next thing you need to do is look at the mark allocation. In this case, the mark allocation is 3 ideas or 2 ideas that are very well discussed. So what does well discussed mean? You need to explore the later events that's going to happen. So remember, if we go back there, in light of later events, which means in our well discussed answer, we're going to talk about those later events. And then you also need to discuss what makes the sentence ironic or opposite. So this is a possible answer. Pi's description of the scene emphasizes his anticipation of a happy life in a new land. Remember, he's saying he's excited, right? He's speaking about favorable weather conditions. The sun is shining, and this evokes feelings of happiness. However, so the word however is your first hint that you're going to be talking about the irony here, because the word however indicates that there's going to be a contrasting idea or an opposite idea. His expectations of a happy future do not materialize. So now I'm referring to the irony, and now I'm going to give some examples. So I'm going to say the Tum Tum sinks, his family drowns, he's stranded on a lifeboat, and he undergoes many struggles before he reaches civilization. So you can see it's quite a lengthy answer. I think if you had to write this out, it would probably be about 3 or 4 lines long. So we've seen that we've discussed the initial scene, which is the happy life in a new land. We've discussed the irony, and we've given some examples of why it is ironic. And in doing so, we've also discussed the later events of the novel. So if you would like to see all of the things that I've mentioned here, these are some websites that you can go to. The bit.ly link is just the study.com link that I needed to make shorter. So if you type that in, it will take you to the study.com place. And you can basically also refer to, you'll see there's English home language mind the gap. If you type that in exactly as it is there into Google, it will bring up that study guide for you. So good luck. The next time I'll see you, I don't know if I'll make another video before you guys write on next week, Thursday. But the next time I'll see you will be for part 3. That's going to be chapters 37 to 57. And that is very loose because I haven't done it yet. So I don't know if where's a good place to cut. So I'm going to say, just as a loose idea, that we'll do chapter 37 to 57 in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.